It was a quiet Tuesday when the call came in. The kind of call that makes your gut tighten before the dispatcher even finishes the address. Rural route, old farmhouse, no power lines in sight. I knew the place. Old man Hargrove lived there, or so rumor said. Haven't seen him in years, not since the story started. The cruiser's radio crackled as I turned onto the gravel driveway. Dust kicked up behind me, settling slow as I rolled to a stop. No car out front. No sign of life, except the front door was ajar. Just a sliver, like someone had left in a hurry. My hand rested on the grip of my pistol as I stepped out, boots crunching on the loose stones. The air smelled like damp earth and something else, something sour. My boots caught on the warped floorboards as I pushed the door the rest of the way open. Inside, the place was a time capsule. Dust motes hung in the stale air, undisturbed until my movement sent them swirling. Old newspapers stacked in corners, yellowed with age. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, like someone had been waiting. I stepped further in, my flashlight cutting through the dim. That's when I saw it. On the kitchen table, right where the light hit. A note, handwritten in shaky script. Just 3 words. They took her. No signature. No explanation. I picked it up, the paper rough under my fingertips. The ink smelled fresh. Someone had been here recently. And if Hargrove hadn't written this, then who the hell had? My radio squawked. Dispatch asking for an update. I holstered the note, my mind already racing. This wasn't just a missing person. This was something else. Something darker. I keyed the mic, my voice steady. Send backup. And get me a warrant. We're going to need the whole team for this one. Both. I remember the rain that night. Not the gentle kind, but the kind that slaps against your face, soaks through your uniform, and makes every step feel twice as heavy. It was one of those calls, domestic disturbance, where you know before you even knock on the door that it's going to be bad. The address led us to a rundown trailer on the outskirts of town. Lights were on inside, flickering through the thin curtains like a bad horror movie. I knocked. No answer. Then I heard it, the scream. Sharp, terrified. My partner, Deputy Martinez, and I drew our weapons. We weren't taking any chances. The door gave way with a kick. Inside, it was a scene straight out of a nightmare. Damn Auntie Beatty, 6'4", covered in tattoos, had Talisha Hale pinned against the wall. She was bleeding, her eyes wide with fear. Beatty turned, slow, like he knew he was already caught. His hands were raised, but there was no surrender in his stance, just defiance. Sheriff's Department. I shouted, keeping my weapon trained on him. On the ground now. Beatty smirked. You ain't talking me nowhere. Martinez moved to cover me as I stepped closer. Last chance, Beatty. That's when he lunged. Not at me, at Talisha. I fired. 1 shot. Beatty dropped like a sack of bricks, clutching his thigh. Blood seeped through his jeans, dark against the linoleum. Talisha collapsed to her knees, sobbing. I holstered my weapon and moved to her, but she flinched. It's okay, I said, keeping my voice low. You're safe now. Beatty groaned from the floor, his face twisted in pain. Bitch had this coming. I cuffed him, ignoring the insults. As we dragged him outside, the rain washed the blood from his leg, swirling pink in the puddles. Talisha stayed inside, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes haunted. Sometimes, you see things you can't unsee. That was one of those nights. The night air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as I stepped out of the patrol car, my flashlight cutting a thin beam through the darkness. The call had come in from a rural neighborhood, vague reports of a disturbance, maybe a break-in. But when I arrived, it wasn't what I expected. The victim, a woman in her late 50s, stood on her porch, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her nerves together. She was shaking, but her voice was steady as she recounted what had happened. She told me she'd come home to find her back door kicked in, her home ransacked. But that wasn't the worst of it. They took my daughter's things, she said, her voice cracking just a little. Not the TV, not the jewelry, just the pictures, the notes, the little trinkets she left behind when she trailed off, and I knew without asking. The daughter was gone. Not just away, but gone. I'd seen a lot in my years on the job, but this hit different. The realization settled in like a cold stone in my gut. This wasn't a random burglary. Someone had targeted this woman, not for what they could steal, but for what they could take. Memories. The last shreds of a mother's grief. I glanced around the yard, the beam of my flashlight catching on something glinting in the grass. A silver locket. I picked it up, flipping it open to find a faded photo of a young woman, smiling. The mother's hands trembled as she took it, her eyes welling up. She would have been 21 next month, she whispered. I nodded, tucking the locket into an evidence bag. My mind was already racing, piecing together the puzzle. But in that moment, all I could think was how some people would stoop to hurt someone like this, and how I'd be damned if I let them get away with it. B_OS. The air in that interrogation room was thick with the scent of sweat and stale coffee. Across the table from me, the suspect, a local business owner with a reputation for being untouchable, kept his hands folded, his fingers drumming a slow, steady rhythm. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've got nothing on me, deputy," he said, voice smooth as oil. I leaned back, studying him. The case had started simple, a tip about accounting discrepancies, some missing funds. But as I dug deeper, the threads unraveled, and they didn't lead to just one man. They led to a web. I could feel it in my gut, the way the pieces fit, the way certain names kept coming up in the right places. The district attorney's office, a judge, even a couple of my own colleagues. It was the kind of rot that made your skin crawl. You could see it in the way people looked at each other, the way voices dropped when you walked into a room. The evidence was piling up, but every time I thought I had something solid, it slipped through my fingers. Documents disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. The system was protecting itself. I remember the night I sat at my desk, the glow of the computer screen the only light in the office. The clock ticked past midnight, but I couldn't sleep. I had a file open, photos, financial records, a recorded conversation. It was enough. But I knew if I moved too fast, if I didn't play this just right, it would all vanish. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I'd have to choose my next step carefully. Because in a web like this, one wrong move, and it could all come crashing down on me. The call came in on a Tuesday afternoon, routine as any other. Missing person, female, last seen near the old mill outside of town. Nothing unusual about that. Folks went missing all the time. But something about the dispatcher's tone, the way she hesitated before giving me the address, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I rolled up to the mill. The place looked like something out of a nightmare. Graffiti covered the peeling walls, the air thick with the stench of damp wood, and something else, something metallic, like old blood. The victim's father, a wiry man with hollow eyes, stood near the entrance, his hands shaking. He pointed to a rusted-out car half hidden in the weeds. That's when I saw them, fresh tire tracks cutting through the overgrowth. My gut twisted. This wasn't just a missing person case. Inside the car, the back seat was torn to shreds, fabric fibers clinging to the metal like frayed nerves. I crouched down, my flashlight catching something glinting near the floorboard. A bracelet, cheap but new, with a tiny engraved L. The victim's name was Laura. The father had given us a photo, but seeing it up close, her smile bright and carefree, made my chest tighten. She was just a kid. The forensics team moved in, their faces grim as they processed the scene. The mill had been used before, we found out later, too many times. The dark corners, the isolated location, made it a perfect spot for the kind of people who didn't care about human lives. It was a wake-up call, seeing the way desperation and cruelty could twist a place like this into something sinister. I stood there for a long time after, staring at the bracelet in an evidence bag. It wasn't just about finding Laura anymore. It was about making sure no one else ended up in that back seat. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement and the metallic tang of gun oil from the uniforms around me.